I will try to be brief, because I guess that you want to have some good food and wine rather than to listen to another speech. George Bernard Shaw, the famous Irish writer, he was moderating a panel once, and he then gave the floor to a parliamentarian, and he said that you have 10 minutes. And then the parliamentarian said, how can I tell everything I know in 10 minutes? And then George Bernard Shaw replied, I advise you to speak slowly. Well, the first conclusion I want to make is that we are looking forward to come back to Bled next year, because this is such a nice place, and it is such an inspiring environment and inspiring gathering that you have here in Bled every year. Well, the world that we are living in today is not very easy to comprehend. And it is not easy to predict what is going to happen in the future. A pessimist is a person that believes that the spring flowers is the first sign of winter. I believe that, well, there is a lot of spring flowers now in the world, which is very, very encouraging. I would like to mention two of them. One is all the young people, in particular the young people that are now going to the streets in the Mediterranean. And what are they demonstrating for? This is very important. It is not radical Islam or violence or all that kinds of things which has been linked to this region. It is the universal human rights. They simply want to live like all other people, and in particular us in Europe, to live a normal life, to have the right to travel, to express themselves, to raise their children, to have a job, to have education. So, I mean, this is an enormous force now, not only in the Mediterranean, but I think all over the world, because this is about globalization. People know about the rights, and it is spreading all over the world. The second thing I want to, another spring flower is the power of the women. We can see this in Africa, and again in the Arab world and in the Middle East. I recall that, I was already in 1976, I was a member of the Norwegian delegation to the UN General Assembly. And this was a year of women in the UN, and the general debate in the UN was about women's right to, in particular, women's right to vote. And everybody was speaking about this, of course, in the general debate. And one day, the ambassador of Saudi Arabia took the floor and spoke on behalf of his country, and he started his speech like this: I don't understand all this talking about women's right to vote. In my country, not even the men have the right to vote. This is still, this is still the situation throughout this region. And this is the root causes of the problem, the lack of freedom. And how can you, in the globalized world, be prosperous? Well, you can be for a short period of time if you have oil. But how can you be prosperous in today's world if women do not have the right to work and to drive a car? So, the demand for participation by women, which we are seeing now in Africa, in the Middle East, is a very, very strong transforming force in the world. Let us look at, apply an historic perspective on the future, what is going to happen. Well, till 1945, the world order was based on on the logic of Westphalia, which was, the world order was established after the wars, the peace treaty in Westphalia, many hundred years back. It was based on the sovereignty of the nation state. Then the French Revolution came, and the Declaration of Freedom in the United States, which said something in addition, namely the sovereignty of the people. This was a basic for democracy, developing many places in the world. The sovereignty of the people. The people had the right to decide within the nation state. The bad side of the coin of this was, of course, that we also got nationalism. Because when the nation state belonged to the people, it was easier to mobilize people for wars and nationalism. And we got two awful wars on the European continent. And the consequence of this was the world order that we have today. Namely, that the world had to move away from nationalism towards internationalism. We got the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the global institutions as a consequence of nationalism that we have seen in Europe before the war. And this is more or less the world order that we are having today. And then in 1989, a new thing happened, namely the Berlin Wall came down. It was actually a consequence of the logic established after 1945, because the quest for freedom had prevailed all over Europe, also in the eastern part of Europe. And when the globalization started and the technological revolution started all over the world, the communist regime was undermined. And people simply climbed up on the Berlin Wall and had the power in their own hands and made a revolution. Nobody understood it, not even in Europe. Nobody were able to understand what happened. And the same thing appeared again only a few months ago in our neighborhood, in the South Mediterranean. We didn't understand it. But what took place was the same, namely that people in the South Mediterranean, they wanted to have the same freedom as we have. And they couldn't tolerate the way these countries were governed any longer, and they got down another wall, namely the wall between the rulers and the people, which is paving now the way for, hopefully, democracy. The revolution has not been made, but it is in making. And again, it is the power of the people, the young people, and their quest for freedom. So what I want to say is that now we are living in the logic of Westphalia plus. I mean, we are living in the logic of the sovereignty of the nation state, but it is restricted, it is limited by the universal human rights. No nation state is any longer allowed to do what they want within their own nation state, because it is restricted by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is what we have done on the European continent. This is why we have the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. It means that if a citizen in Europe, in any European nation state, believes that their national authority is not in compliance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is actually the European Convention of Human Rights, then they can bring the case to an international court, namely the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. This is a new thing that happened. So therefore we are living in the logic of Westphalia and Westphalia Plus, the sovereignty of the nation state, but limited by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And make no mistake, no authoritarian regime will prevail for the future. Freedom will come to everybody. So we have to make a choice whether we are on the right side or on the wrong side of history. But I would also like to say, we have to move beyond Westphalia Plus. Because what we are witnessing today is that we get more and more diversity within the nation state. In Europe today, I think the main problem is that we are obsessed with identity, but we are not able to understand. Most of us are not able to understand that most of us have several identities. We are living in a society with deep diversity. And we can make a choice. Either we try to benefit from this situation, or we are heading for a new catastrophe. This is why I appointed a group of eminent persons, headed by Joschka Fischer, the former foreign minister of Germany, to make a report on how to live together in a diverse reality that we have in Europe today. How to live together in the 21st century, where we not only have nation states and universal rights, but we also have societies based on deep diversity. And I think we also need to understand that this is not only about Europe. We have migration and flow of people all over the world. Today there are 220 million migrants in the world. 220 million migrants. This 40 million more than a decade ago are migrants moving over the borders, settling in a new country. And if we add to this the number of people that are traveling to another country to stay there for some months or a year or so, it is 1 billion people. So what I'm saying, I think we need to understand that migration and mobility is the essence of globalization. And then, if we put this into the perspective of what we are dealing with in Europe, we should understand that the discussion that we are entertaining here is not so relevant, because we are making 25,000 people coming from the South Mediterranean to a huge problem on this continent. But it's not, if you put it in the perspective of what is going on in the world. And how can we teach people in the South Mediterranean to develop democracy and rule of law and respect for tolerance and human rights if we are not able to take care of 25,000 people coming from the South Mediterranean? I can tell you, when we had the wars on the Balkans, the neighboring country of my home country, Sweden, they received, only in Sweden, they received during 1 year 80,000 people, only in Sweden. But we were able to cope with it. But now we do not, obviously there's a huge political debate about much fewer people coming from the South Mediterranean. How is it? So I think Europe needs to be able to live with the neighborhood we have, and we have to understand that we have become a continent of diversity, and that we have to make the good out of it rather than to construct a big problem that we see many places in Europe today. Well, I would like to end up by saying that there is a strong need in the world today to be we have to be curious, because I mean, in the past we have got so many surprises which we were not able to predict. So we have to think about that the world is on the move and we will get new surprises, and we have to be prepared for it. And we need to have empathy for other people and how other people are thinking. One of the most famous Norwegians during all times was the great explorer Thor Heyerdahl, who traveled on the Kon-Tiki fleet from South America to prove that the people in Polynesia had come from the west and not to the east. Can you imagine setting out on a fleet at the mercy of the Pacific to prove that this was the case? And he was a man that had this curiosity that we need today. He was once making a lecture at a university, and then one of the students, he raised his arm and said, "Mr. Heyerdahl, who discovered America? Was it Christopher Columbus or the Norwegian Leif Erikson?" Of course, the student wanted to hear that it was a Norwegian that discovered America. And then Thor Heyerdahl replied, "Ask those who were on the shores when they came." So he had the ability to see the history from the other side of the world. And this is what we need to do today also. We need to understand each other, to realize that other people have another historic background, and that they have a different way of living and different way of thinking. But one thing is uniting us, and this is the strongest force that we have had in the world after the Second World War, and continues to be stronger and stronger. It is the quest for human rights, universal human rights. Nobody can avoid it. This will transform the entire world in the future as it has been doing in the past. Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, hi guests, they told me not to be too sweet before dessert, because otherwise everybody will be not touching it. So it's my honor and pleasure to be able to welcome you here, to share some of my thoughts with you. I think BSOL is a passionate supporter of Blade Strategic Forum. It's a forum that every year invites eminent, open-minded people from all over the world to discuss subjects of past, present, and particularly the future. It's a forum that somehow sets the strategy of the humankind, and we are happy to participate. BSOL is currently a group of 25 companies. We are established in 5 European countries with headquarters here in Slovenia. So besides Slovenia, we are in United Kingdom, Belgium, Italy, France, and Germany. Currently, we employ altogether 300 colleagues and another 300 working for us as subcontractors. We are marketing our products in 17 different countries. And currently, it's a high season for us, and we have about €2 million turnover per week. So in that sense, I'm proud to say that, at least for now, we are a good example of how to do business in renewable energy. I think it's a business of the future. And in this way, I'm quite sure that this is the future of the power. I think when we are talking about the changes are always coming from within ourselves. And especially the changes that are coming from within ourselves are in the subject of this forum, also the power of the future. So I wish you to have a pleasant dessert, to have continued fruitful discussion, and I'm very much looking forward to meeting you all again next year. Thank you very much.